Welcome into UFC Fight Night Picks with Matthew Holt. We're talking UFC May 16th from Jacksonville, Florida. Right now, the epicenter for the UFC. Matt, welcome into the show. How you feeling today, buddy?
Good, man. What a great card we had last night. Really exciting. What a Wednesday treat. After everything that's happened with COVID, it was great to have that first live sports Saturday card. Live sports in America on a big-time way with the pay-per-view card with Justin Gaethje. But then there was this letdown, like, what are we going to do all week? And what a treat to have a fun card right in the middle of the week to bet. It's exciting. I'm pumped up for this week.
Absolutely. I mean, Saturday night, Wednesday night, back at it Saturday night. So we got the kind of last one coming up for this week, again, from Jacksonville, Florida. It starts the prelims, 6 o'clock Eastern time, and then the main event card at 9 o'clock Eastern on ESPN Plus here. And guys, we're going to be breaking down 4 fights on the show, get Matt's top picks here, and then questions at the end. Any questions, feel free to chime in on YouTube here, and we'll get them out to Matt. And if I have any input, I'll answer them as well. Also on Twitter. Don't be bashful, guys. Let us know what you think. But Matt, let's not bury the lead here. We got the main event: Overeem versus Harris, and Jacksonville, Florida, 9 p.m. main event here. Alistair, the Demolition Man, Overeem versus Walt, the big ticket Harris. We're seeing it anywhere from -140 to -170, kind of a wide range here for a main event, at least in my opinion. Some opinion in the marketplace here. But either way, Matt, interested in your opinion on this one, Overeem versus Harris. How you looking to bet it?
And I like Walt Harris here, but I think the reason that we're seeing the big fluctuation is it's the big interpretation of how is Walt Harris going to deal with the murder of his daughter. And what a tragic story. If you don't know what happened with Walt Harris, you can Google it. His daughter was actually kidnapped and murdered, and they didn't know what happened to her for a while. It wasn't just like she was murdered. It was that she was kidnapped. She was missing for a period of time. Finally, they found her body. Finally, they found the individual who murdered her. I mean, it's a really tragic story, everything surrounding it. And like we saw last night with Anthony Lionheart-Smith, who did seem a little bit distracted and a little bit too emotional coming into the cage. He was awesome in round 1, but he had this huge energy dump, it looked like, from being too emotional and too ramped up. And I've heard some people make a good case that they're nervous that Walt Harris may also be too fired up and too distracted and too emotional. The first fight ever after the murder of his daughter and dealing with that he may come in too emotional and have that energy dump into the second and third round or as the fight goes on. The problem is I'm not sure this fight's going to go very long and that Alistair Overeem's going to make it past that initial wave of energy by Walt Harris in this fight. Look at Alistair Overeem's last 11 losses have all come by KO, and Walt Harris is a huge puncher. This is a guy who came into the UFC as a wrestler, kind of grinder. His technical striking and power has finally caught up with his wrestling and his ability and his athleticism, and I think it's going to be a huge a one-sided fight here. I think Walt Harris has the opportunity to take him down and finish him. I mean, look, that's Alistair Overeem's kind of MO right now, is when he fights big punchers, he gets knocked out. We've seen it the last 11 times he lost. They're all by knockout. And when you look at all the fights Alistair Overeem's had, over 60 fights in MMA, along with a long accomplished career in kickboxing, this is a guy who has probably too many combat sports miles on his body. The wins that he's gotten lately come against a 40-plus-year-old Alexei Olenek and guys that try to, submission game with Overeem more. He's having a lot of trouble with punchers. I think he's going to have a lot of trouble with Walt Harris, who is 36 years old. He's the younger guy in this fight, but he's not younger by a lot, just 4 years younger. But it's the fresher guy. He only has 23 pro fights ever, Walt Harris. He's a fresh 36. I think he gets the stoppage here, and I think it comes probably within the first 7.5 minutes of the fight.
So Matt, it sounds like you're liking Harris, minus the juice here. Would you? And we got Liam in the chat box saying Harris KO. Would you look to bet him in another form or fashion here, rather than just win the fight? Maybe win by KO, TKO, anything like that?
I 100% would recommend, if you're betting Walt Harris, to bet Walt Harris to win by KO at plus money, because at the end of the day, we've seen when Alistair Overeem loses, the last 11 times he's lost, it's by knockout. And when Walt Harris wins, look at his wins lately, they're all by knockout. So we have a knockout puncher who wins by knockout against the guy who tends to get knocked out every time he loses. I think that's the way to bet this fight. Walt Harris by knockout at plus money, and there's a variance of what you'll get there, but you could certainly get plus money.
All right, good stuff, Matt. Starting off here with the main event. And guys, we're breaking down 4 fights on the video here. Throw out any questions you got in the chat box. Next fight up here, not the main event, but a good one here, Matt. Edson Barboza minus 130 versus Dan Inge. Which way you looking to go in this one?
So this one's a little bewildering to me, in that the big unknown is how will Edson Barboza do cutting down to 145 pounds for the first time. But when you look at Edson Barboza's resume, he has fought all the greatest fighters that there are at lightweight. Khabib Nurmagomedov, Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, Paul Felder, Cowboy Cerrone, Anthony Pettis. Edson Barboza has literally been in there with everyone who's anyone except Conor McGregor in the lightweight division. So this guy's only fought the very best fighters in the world now for years. Suddenly he's on a little bit of a skid, lost his last fight last September to Paul Felder, but that was a split decision. That was a razor close fight against the top 5 lightweight. But now, because lightweight is so jammed up, and we see this happen whenever there's elite guys in a division, the division tends to slow down. Right now we have Conor McGregor, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Justin Gaethje, all at the top of the lightweight division. That tends to slow down the big money title fights. When champions are a little less, money making, think of Demetrius Johnson in his prime, great fighter, but didn't, generate huge pay-per-view numbers. He would fight 3 times a year, maybe even 4 in some years. But these big pay-per-view generating guys, Conor, Khabib, Nurmagomedov, they're only fighting once or twice a year tops. Khabib will fight 1 time this year, and that's it. So at the end of the day, if you're Edson Barboza now coming off 3 losses in your last 4 fights, even though they're against Gaethje and Khabib, you're not in line for a title fight anymore. So he feels like featherweight may be his quicker path to, an elite level title fight. The problem is the weight cut with these guys. Anytime anybody switches weight, I worry about how they're going to look at that weight. And thus, I'm waiting to bet this one on the scales. If it's still minus 130 tomorrow and Edson Barboza looks healthy, making 145 pounds, I think this is way too big of a leap for Dan Inge. We've seen these guys, for whatever reason, and I don't understand the overvaluing, but I think there's been a consensus and consistent overvaluing of all the guys coming off that Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series show. Dan Inge has been great. He's another guy that came off the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender show, lost his UFC debut. Now he's on a 5-fight win streak against lesser competition. This is a huge step up in class. I'm going to go ahead right now and make the assumption that Edson Barboza is going to make weight comfortably. And the one thing we know in the UFC that makes this more prevalent than it ever used to be is when they used to do the weigh-ins at 5 p.m. Eastern or later, it was harder for the guys then to rehydrate in time because they had less time. But now they do it at 10 a.m. So these guys weigh in really early, and they get 30, 34, 36 hours from the time they weigh in until the fight. That extra rehydration time is huge for these guys cutting big weight. So for that reason, let's assume Edson Barboza is going to be at least close to full strength. Even though he's slowed down a tad at 34 years old, I still think he's way too big, way too experienced, way too strong for Dan Inge. And at minus 130, that's probably a steal. I'm going to go ahead and lay it with Edson Barboza.
He's Matt Holt. He's follow him on Twitter at Matthew Holt USI. He's the president of US Integrity, and they got a new website here: www.sge.com. SGE stands for Sports Gambling Education. And Matt, what do you guys got going over there with the new website?
Yeah, so look, we recently partnered up with Ohio University, who runs the preeminent master's program for sports administration throughout the entire country, and launched a program for anybody looking to get involved in sports betting, whether it's through sports administration, corporate sponsorships, media. We have some amazing guest lecturers like Sarah Slane, the former head of the American Gaming Association Sports Betting Task Force, Carl Benison, the former chief enforcement officer of the Nevada Gaming Control Board, Bob Bolin, the chief integrity officer at Penn State University, who talks about how athletic administrators are dealing with sports betting. There's just a lot of great insight for people looking to get into the marketplace. SGE.com is the website you can go to sign up and enroll in the classes.
And I see you got your SEC a little bit sweater on there
today, right? You like that?
Yeah. I didn't know you were an SEC guy, other than University of Kentucky, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm Big Blue, baby.
All right.
Just because we disappear during football season, come on.
All right, buddy. Well, all right, two down, 2 to go here. We got Marlon Vera plus 175 versus Yadong Song. I believe that's how you pronounce it here. Matt, what are you thinking with this third fight up?
Look, we see this all the time in MMA. Prospects rushed along too quickly at a young age. Think Max Holloway. Think how good Max Holloway is in his career. But think of the losses he took along the way before he really became Max Holloway. Marlon Vera is almost a prototype of where Song was. A few years back, Marlon Vera was a 23-year-old prospect that got a signature win over Brad Pickett, and retired Brad Pickett after that fight, got another big win after that, and was immediately thrown in with the number 3 ranked guy in the world, John Lineker at the time, and went the distance and lost that fight, but learned a big lesson, fought another ranked guy in De Silva Andrade after, and really, went back, hit the gym, started taking those lessons that these young guys learn. MMA isn't a sport. When you think of all the elite guys and you looked at the ranked guys and the champions of every division, you don't see 22-year-olds. It just doesn't happen in MMA. Normally, it takes guys longer to mature because there's so many skill sets to perfect. Jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai. You have to learn all these skill sets to be ready for all these different fight types you're going to be in. So guys don't tend to excel at 22 and 23. They tend to hit a wall somewhere. Marlon Vera himself did it, but now he's back on a 5-fight win streak, 27 years old, trains at an elite gym. This is a guy who I think could be fighting for a title or right there in a couple of years. On the other side, Song's one of these really charismatic fighters, high-risk guy, really goes for it. But we saw him step up a little bit in class at his last fight against Cody Stamann, who's not at the level of Marlon Vera, and he ended up only getting a majority draw. I think this is a huge step up in class for a 22-year-old in Song to be fighting a guy in Marlon Vera who, for whatever reason, is still massively underestimated in the betting markets on a 5-fight win streak against top guys in the UFC. I think Marlon Vera probably should have been the favorite in this fight, and I got plus 170. You could still get plus 160, I think plus 165 now in the market. I think Marlon Vera is a steal at that price.
All right, I like it. The big dog here, and you're right. The market has moved upwards of 20 cents here. It's now, plus 175 is a little bit behind us, but you're right. You can get it in the plus 160s. It looks like right now, so check that out as the big underdog in that one. We got one fight left, and anybody out there on YouTube right now, watching on Twitter, feel free to send in any questions. We'll get them at the end here. Rodrigo Nascimento. It looks like a short underdog here versus Dontel Mays. Matt, how are you looking to bet the last fight up, man?
So 2 young guys, both entering the UFC here. Nascimento is the undefeated guy. Mays is definitely the bigger puncher. He comes in with a little more punching power. He is an absolute monster. 6'6", has to cut weight to get down to 265. And we saw Mays, his size and how big he is and the respect for that power gives Cyril Gane, a really top heavyweight in Cyril Gane, so some issues in his UFC debut. But what we learned about Mays in that one UFC fight that we saw is that he's kind of plodding. Like a lot of big, giant heavyweights, he lumbers around the octagon a little bit. He's a little bit slower of a guy. And he ended up getting submitted in that fight. And what I think is interesting is he's fighting a Brazilian here who's 7-0, 7 finishes, 5 submissions, who's a dynamo on the ground, who is super athletic. He's going to be a little bit smaller guy, couple inches shorter, probably about 20 pounds lighter. But I think he's going to have big speed advantages. Look, Mays has already been knocked out before. He's already been submitted before. I think what's probably going to happen here is there's going to be some scary moments early on in the fight, as Mays is going to carry huge power in that first round when they're both full energy. And that's probably his best chance of winning. But I think as the fight goes on, if we can get out of the first round, then all of a sudden we're going to see a massive shift, and Nascimento's athleticism and speed could probably take over. And I think similar to the Michael Johnson fight yesterday, I think it's only going to take one takedown. If Nascimento just gets one takedown in this fight, I don't think they ever get back up. It's hard for heavyweights to scramble back to their feet. It's much easier for these 145, 155-pound guys to scramble back to their feet after being taken down. It's hard for these heavyweights to get up and scramble back up. I think if Nascimento can get one takedown, he ends up getting the submission here, and you can get him about even money. I think he's the more experienced. I think he's the better fighter. I think he's more well-rounded. He has athleticism advantages in this fight. Certainly is the better grappler in this fight, and you get him at even money. So I think he has more ways to win the fight, and we're getting maybe even at a small plus price. I like Nascimento here.
Nice. Good stuff here, Matt. So it looks like slight underdog there. So 2 underdogs leaning towards 2 favorites on Saturday night's card from Jacksonville, Florida, Fight Night. So I believe the hashtag is UFC Florida. We got questions here from Twitter. Also a question from Ben Picks here. Gadelha versus Hill, who wins? Do you have any opinion on the Gadelha fight, Matt?
Striker versus grappler matchup. I mean, it's as simple as the handicap is this simple. If you think Claudia Gadelha take Angela Hill down, then you probably have to end up on the Claudia. Angela Hill will be able to stuff takedowns. She's certainly going to win the striking battle. This is a tricky one for me. I don't love either fighter. So I think Angela Hill has cardio for days, but she tends to lose big fights. She tends to beat the people she's supposed to beat and lose when she steps up in class. And her grappling game certainly has never been there. She's more of a kickboxer, and a volume kickboxer at that. She's not a power striker, Angela Hill. She beats you by massive amounts of volume. Claudia Gadelha, on the other hand, she certainly wants to take this fight to the ground all the time, but she has a tendency to fade in fights. So, I lean toward Claudia Gadelha because you think about the experience she has fighting Joanna Jędrzejczyk for the title and fighting the most elite strawweights that there is. But because she fades and Angela Hill's cardio is so good, I could see a scenario where Gadelha gets the takedowns early in the first, dominates round 1, starts to fatigue. Angela Hill starts coming on, maybe wins round 2 and 3. Too close to call for me.
And Matt, a quick question here from Alec Robinson. Any thoughts on Anders versus Jotko?
Look, I actually think Anders is live here, and I'm contemplating making a play on him as the underdog. Jotko getting a little bit too much respect. I think he's a good middleweight, not great. Krzysztof Jotko is another guy we've seen that kind of, when he steps up in class, hasn't fared that well, and a little bit chinny. I've seen him hurt several times from shots. And Anders punches he kicks like a mule, and he has punches like a truck. This is a guy who's really, really strong. The problem with Anders is if he doesn't get that knockout, he has that football player's body coming from the former University of Alabama football player's Anders. He looks like a football player. The problem is when he doesn't get that knockout, he's not technically sound enough anywhere to actually go out and outpoint people. He doesn't have the best technical striking. He doesn't have the best technical grappling. But what he does have is a hell of a chin. He's an amazing grappler, and he has huge power. And Jotko's a little chinny. If I was forced to play this one, I'm definitely taking the plus money with Eryk Anders.
All right, Matt. And two more questions here real quick from Twitter. Greek Freak asking, what kind of criteria and method would you use to come up with opening lines when you set them at CG Technology?
So when we talk about opening lines, we have to assume that we're the world openers, because I hate it when people talk about their opening lines, but somebody else in the market that's credible already had lines, because then you're just basically copying market prices, right, and then managing them off your risk. So let's pretend that you're setting the world opener. There's two things you have to do. First of all, use past odds as a criteria. Look at what the odds were recently in these fighters and in fights with similar situations. Come up with a price that you think, well, I wouldn't bet it at that. This is a fair market value. And then set low limits, what we call that first hour after whoever sets the world openers. Everyone should always give these people a break and say, hey, there's going to be a market stabilization period where no one else has this market up. We're the first one to put it up. We're going to let you bet it, but for lower limits, 500 or 1,000 a pop. And now as the bets come in, we can see where you disagree with the odds maker, let the market stabilize, and then take bigger limits. So anytime people put up world openers and they're the only place, give them a break if they're not taking huge bets, because they're letting that market stabilize a bet. They're the ones taking that risk for putting out a market no one else has.
I'm with you, Matt. I've never complained about the sports book that's opening taking, only 500 or heck, only 250. I think it's fine. If you're the only sport, the only place in town, it's tough for people to complain in that situation. Sometimes I almost feel like it's something in the marketplace where it's like sports bettors sound cool in terms of being like, oh, they're only taking a nickel. They're kind of trying to play that card a little bit. And I think, some sports bettors are running with that. We do have one more question here, Matt, from Diehard MMA Podcast. Thoughts on Michael Johnston's meltdown last night?
I don't know that it was a meltdown. So first of all, Michael Johnston's first round performance was flawless. I mean, unbelievable. He stuffed 2 takedowns. I mean, he was just so crisp with his striking. He put on a clinic in the first round. So at the very beginning of the second round, immediately as they come out, the guy completely sells out, runs and jumps across the octagon to get Michael Johnson, a complete desperation takedown attempt. And Michael Johnson couldn't escape it. He was almost out, but his leg got caught. And we've seen Michael Johnson in before. When he gets on the ground with a jiu-jitsu specialist, it normally spells the end of the night. And he couldn't get out of it. And he ended up getting stuck in a rare knee bar.
Yeah, that was why it ended well for him. But he looked good up until that point. I'm with you. Guys, he's Matthew Holt, the president of US Integrity. Check out his new website, sge.com, sports gambling education. Matt, did you want to throw out anything before we shut this down in conclusion?
No, man. Look, I know that there was a lot of talk about, whether it was good or not that the UFC, whether it would work before this week. What a great week it's been. I mean, we've all been stuck at home so long with nothing. And it's nice to see that there can be live sports in America again, and that we can all bet on it, enjoy it, and the world didn't end and nothing went terribly wrong out of it. So I was pretty excited to see this week. And I think it set a blueprint for other leagues or other people looking to put on sporting events, that you can still do a great production without fans, that there's a big demand and a big appetite for live sports in the U.S. Just look at the betting handle numbers and the viewership on these UFC. And I hope that this will spur other leagues to say, look, the UFC really did it successfully and laid out the blueprint. Maybe we can follow as well.
Totally with you, Matt. And heck, hopefully it lands on the right side for us, because I'll be tailing you again. 2-1 last night. The main event didn't go our way, but I guess we kind of had to give out a pick on that. But your pick's 2-1, so shout out to you. But looking towards Harris as the favorite, Barboza minus 130. Looks like Marlon, Vera plus 155 right now, and Rodrigo plus 100 as the underdog. So for Matt Holt, I'm Drew Martin. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe if you can. Remember to wash your hands, and best of luck with your bets, guys.